My name is Matt Walsh, and I've written a book called Johnny the Walrus. This book is about identity and imagination. He identifies as a walrus, and his mom's a little silly. She takes it seriously and thinks he really is a walrus. So she went on her phone, and there were people telling her that this isn't pretend, he's really a walrus. And his mother takes him to the doctor to have him surgically transitioned and gets him walrus hormone pills, and then eventually tries to drop him off at a zoo to live with other walruses. Not only topping the Amazon charts, my book has taken the world by storm.
Well, you just saw my next guest, author and conservative host of Daily Wire's The Matt Walsh Show, talking about his recently published children's book that has since been removed online by a popular large retail chain. Now, Matt says gender is not a social construct, but rooted firmly in biology. True?
True, absolutely. Well, actually, just to clarify, and with all due respect, but most of what we just heard in the previous segment was total nonsense, which is why when you were pushing for definitions and that sort of thing, they were not able to provide it because it's just nonsensical. Sex, well, as human beings, we have a sex, male or female. That is a biological scientific fact. Now, gender is a linguistic term. Words have gender. People don't.
You're saying that there should be no construct of gender, just sex. You're either male or female.
Right.
And someone feeling in a mental, emotional way that they don't identify with the sex that they have been biologically created as and assigned at birth based on their genitalia. If they don't feel that way, that there's no construct that describes that, experiences that.
Well, that's got nothing to do with the reality. So you can feel however you want. I mean, I could sit here and say that I feel like a tomato plant, but that doesn't mean that I actually am those things. So your self-perception, you can have whatever self-perception you want, but you can't expect me to take part in that self-perception or to take part in this kind of charade, this theatrical production. You don't get your own pronouns, just like you don't get your own prepositions or your own adjectives. You know, it's like if I were to tell you, my adjectives are handsome and brilliant, and no matter whenever you're talking about me, you have to describe me as handsome and brilliant because that's how I identify. It makes no sense. You don't get your own pronouns. That's grammar. That's language.
So you think it's a delusion? Someone is self-delusional?
Yeah, I think it's delusion. It could be mental illness. It could be it's a lot of different things. With children, wow. You know, there's also just a basic confusion that all kids have. Like that's why when you hear a parent say, "Oh, my 4-year-old son came to me and said that I'm a girl now, and so that's what I'm gonna raise him as a girl." No, you're a 4-year-old. I have 4 kids. When a 4-year-old boy comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm a girl," here's a good follow-up question. What is a girl? Ask him what he means by that. What do you mean by girl? And when you ask him that, here's what he'll tell you. He will tell you what he really means is that he wants to do some of the things that girls do, like play with the dollhouse, or you know, he likes the color pink. That's fine, play with the dollhouse, but you're still a boy. And that's a question I would like to throw out to other members of the panel, actually, because just like the 4-year-old can't answer what is a girl, well, this is one of the problems with this left-wing gender ideology is that no one who espouses it can even tell you what these words mean. It's like, what is a woman? Well, can you tell me what a woman is?
No, I can't. Because it's not for me to say. Womanhood looks different for everybody.
What do you define a woman as?
An adult human female.
And what does a female mean?
Well,
how do you define a female?
Someone with female reproductive organs.
Okay.
Someone who's, here's the thing. When you're female, it goes right down to your bones, your DNA. So that's why if someone dies, we could dig up their bones 100 years from now. We have no idea what they believed in their head, but we can tell what sex they were because it's ingrained in every fiber of their being.
Interesting. So I'm trying to understand. Your definition is that a woman is someone who is female, you said, right?
Correct. Is a biological female.
So what happens if we have maybe someone who is female, identifies as a woman, right? Cisgender woman, right? As you just explained, maybe doesn't have the ability to reproduce. Maybe doesn't have those organs that you're talking about that are reproductive organs.
I have answered the question. You stood up here and said trans women are women.
Yes.
Tell me what you mean. What is a woman?
Womanhood is something that, just as Ethan explained, I cannot define because I am not myself.
But you used the word, so what did you mean when you said trans women are women if you don't know what it means?
Right. So here's the thing. So I do not define what a woman is because I do not identify as a woman. Womanhood is something that is an umbrella term. It includes people
that describes what?
People who identify as a woman.
Identify as what?
As a woman.
What is that?
Was to each their own. Each woman, each man, each person is going to have a different relation with their own gender identity and define it differently.
That doesn't-
And so
I'm not
trans
asking for
women are women too.
Okay.
And you want to hold on.
Say it again. Trans
You
women
want
are
to
women.
reduce.
What, you
listen,
won't even
listen.
tell me
You
what the
wanna
word means, though. So
you
that's
want to
the
reduce
problem.
women. You want to reduce men down to maybe just their genetics, our genitals,
No.
our chromosomes, right? That's what you're
What
saying.
you want to
is that
do is
that's what we are at
you
the end of the day.
want to do is appropriate women. You want to appropriate womanhood.
Okay.
And turn it into basically a costume that can be worn. We've got when
So,
we've.
as a
Hey, it's real
man,
funny.
you're
It's real
literally
funny. It's
saying
real funny
what a
when
woman
you're.
should look
Yeah,
like.
right.
As a man, you're literally saying this is what a woman is.
Yeah. Well,
Isn't that a little sexist?
Because I am willing to define it, but you won't.
Hang on. We've heard how Matt feels about pronouns, but my next guest says those who oppose them are asking the wrong questions. What does she say are the right ones? We'll add her to the conversation when we come back. Okay, take a break.
You can laugh all you want, but this is a logical problem. You are conflating sex and gender.
There's biological sex, and then there is gender identity. Part of me wants to ask why you care so much.
Well, we've been talking about the great gender pronoun debate that has the country divided, just almost 50-50. Last segment, Matt made his case against people using what are called their own pronouns. But my next guest says the opposition is taking the wrong approach. Joining us on stage is Dr. Susie Denbo, Associate Professor at Kent State University with a PhD in communications and expertise in gender, sex, and feminism. Now, Kent State has been recognized among the nation's most LGBTQ plus friendly universities. Now, doctors, thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
You've been listening to everything that we've been talking about. So, Dr. Denbo, how do you feel those who oppose using pronouns are taking the wrong approach in this conversation?
I think there's the extreme approach that you are admittedly taking, and then there's also just ordinary people that might not be comfortable with the language change. And it just is awkward. And so they're afraid of not being courteous or being accepting. So there's like these two things. There's actually combating and not being, you don't like transgender, the idea of transgender. That's different than pronouns. But then just for most people, it's just feeling a little bit awkward and unsure and not wanting to hurt or offend somebody.
Well, why is it important for educators to teach about gender identity, gender presentation, and pronouns? Why do you think that's important?
Because there is a difference. There is biological sex, and a lot of times people are conflating sex and gender. So there's biological sex, and then there's gender, and that's a social construct in the sense that just because you're born biologically a female doesn't mean you automatically want to vacuum, for instance, which is usually a feminine activity or conflated that way. And so it's this idea of giving children in age-appropriate ways an understanding that these things aren't set in stone. Gender identity is not tied to biology.
You say that gender's not set in stone.
It's not.
What do you mean?
I mean that's just factually incorrect saying that. So you have biology is the chromosomal makeup and reproductive organs and all of that. And so that would be sort of the nature side of things. But the nurture side of things is where we see more of gender identities.
She began by saying that my view is extreme. Okay, so the view that every single person on Earth has held up until 15 seconds ago is extreme, and the view that almost everyone does right now still hold is extreme, apparently, according to her. But there is this they are conflating gender and sex because on one hand they say, well, you got your biological sex, but then your gender is whatever social construct. But then they turn around and say that trans women are women. So a man who identifies with the gender, the social construct of womanhood, actually is a woman. So if you can laugh all you want, but this is a logical problem. You are conflating sex and gender just by saying that. So that's the problem.
There's biological sex, and then there is gender identity. Part of me wants to ask why you care so much, because it's really not that big of a deal.
Can I answer that? I'd love to answer that question. I care about the truth. So basic truth matters. I want to live in a society where people care about the truth and we're grounded in truth. Right. I care about children, and these insane ideas about gender are being foisted on kids, and that bothers me quite a bit. I care about the women who are having their opportunities stolen from them. I care quite a bit, yeah.
You are a champion for women. I'm more interested in creating a productive space where we can try to build some kind of an acceptance around other people and exposing children to different ideas around gender identity. I don't think is a problematic thing with parents being involved.
My next guest are parents who say no way should children learn about gender pronouns at an early age, not under their watch. They say if this is going to happen, it's the parents' job, not teachers. One pulled her kids out of school. We'll meet them after the break. Well, you just saw a news clip about a teacher in Virginia who was suspended after opposing the school's gender policy. Now, inclusion in schools is a major topic of conversation because parents and administrators, well, they just don't always see eye to eye. My next guests are two concerned parents with kids the same age. Now, they used to be in the same school district until one mom pulled her children out. So while they didn't know each other before, they have unified for the same cause. Stacey, Matt, why do y'all have an issue with the schools telling children about pronouns and having them deal with them?
First of all, thank you for having me. And I wanted to say I honor you and your journey and where you are in life. And it has nothing to do with that. We're here about our kids. And so in school, I feel like this is a family issue. It's a parent-child issue, and it's a real issue with some kids. I think that the percentage is quite small for how many kids go through this real serious issue, and including and imposing this on the entire school or the entire class is where I have a problem.
There's no reason an 8-year-old should be taking an assignment that says, what is the gender spectrum? And I had to explain to my 8-year-old son that they're about the gender spectrum and no longer about boys and girls, about femininity, feminine clothes, that uniforms could be sexist.
Well, let's look at your 8-year-old's homework assignment. It says uniforms may be sexist. Some uniforms may strike students and parents as sexist. For example, if a uniform requires girls to wear skirts and pants are not allowed, some students and parents may object, leading to conflict with the school's administration. Not all girls want to wear skirts, and some may resent being told to wear traditionally feminine garments. Also, if a student is unsure of their place on the gender spectrum or is experimenting with different forms of gender presentation, school uniforms can present a real challenge. Now, what was the assignment?
The assignment was whether school uniforms, pro or con, should schools have uniforms? And I believe they had that assignment just so they could squeeze this in. This was an agenda and not appropriate for 8-year-old children. When I drop my child off at school, I don't expect him to be indoctrinated. Why are we doing this? Shouldn't the schools be focused on science and education and learning and reading and writing? And instead they're being taught, are you a boy? Are you a girl? And they're confusing the children.
We're going to take a break. What these parents feel about gender-neutral locker rooms and bathrooms next. We've been talking about gender pronouns with all of our guests today. Stacey and Matt are two concerned parents with one shared mission, and that's to recall the local school board. They say their children were too young to be introduced to gender pronouns in elementary school. And they say if that conversation is going to be had, they'll have it. They don't want the teacher doing this. They don't want this taking place in school, that's something that they want to do with their children at the right time if they have that curiosity. And you have an issue with gender-neutral restrooms.
Correct. This is a war on gender. Just like how Addison mentioned before with the pumpkin that in that picture it said no gender or gender's over.
Gender's over, yeah.
Gender's over. Well, I believe in gender. And to deny that there's a difference, to say gender's over is radical stuff that should not be taught to third graders. That's dangerous. And if you extrapolate and continue on, then it leads to to gender-neutral bathrooms, which they're doing at the school district next to us. And they're doing that throughout the country. And gender-neutral bathrooms and locker rooms and that's just not safe. That is a dangerous situation to keep them combined in the same space.
Yeah. How do you feel about the gender-neutral bathrooms and locker rooms?
Yeah,
Matt?
well, I agree with my fellow Matt over here. Loudoun County is a famous case that the Daily Wire we helped uncover. There was a gender non-conforming boy in a dress who went into a girl's restroom and violently raped a young girl. After that happened, that's when the school district decided, oh, you know what? Now we're going to open up the restrooms and invite the boys in with the girls. Now, here's what happens. Because we hear a lot about, well, gender nonconforming people, transgender people, it makes them feel bad if they're not given access to the bathrooms they want. Well, okay, so they have their feelings. What about the feelings of the girls who are getting raped? There are many girls and many women who are speaking out and saying, we want privacy in our facilities. We don't want a man in the bathroom with us. And then what we hear
Most
from
people
what we hear
want
from this
privacy
side,
in the bathroom.
what we hear from this side.
I did not
is,
say that we want open bathrooms where anyone
okay,
can go in.
what we hear from this side is that, well, their feelings don't matter. We're not going. Who cares? You just have to deal with it, right? Because the transgender people, the gender nonconforming people, it's their fefeelings that take priority.
I'm not trying to minimize your concern around it, but I don't know that it's a safety issue. You usually still have another bathroom that you can go to.
It's a security issue. My daughter would not feel safe or secure if she had to share a bathroom or a gender-neutral locker room with boys.
All right, normally on birth certificates, you have two choices, male and female. Well, not anymore. I'll explain when we come back. The term the media is used for this is not a baby, but a baby. Arlo, how old is the baby now?
Oh, Sparrow's actually going to be 4 in February.
Has Sparrow decided as...
Oh, a gender?
Yes.
Oh, that's a great question. Sparrow is in a point of learning and exploration with a lot of things, including gender. Language with children at 4 is very, they're figuring it out. And so currently, Sparrow uses he for everyone. No, it doesn't matter what their pronouns are, and we mentioned it. They just call everyone he, they don't conjugate it correctly. They don't use him or his or anything. Just he for everything. So we joke that he is Sparrow's preferred pronoun because that's what they use for everyone. As far as for themselves, though, they're not coming consistently saying, I would like, I want to be a boy or a girl, or I feel like I'm non-binary. We don't have heavy, in-depth, overt communications. It's not like every morning I wake them up and say, all right, what's your gender today? Hoping they'll finally give me an answer. So it doesn't come up like that.
Okay, you decided this was important to leave unspecified, undetermined. Why?
Because of the fact that gender is so social, and it is such a social construct. Now, we say we shouldn't interact with one another differently because of our genders. Everyone deserves the same respect and treatment. But it has been scientifically proven that children are interacted with very differently based on whether they are assumed to be a boy or a girl. Girl children are held more, boy children are given, mechanical toys more often, all of these kind of examples, anecdotes. And I felt it was important for Sparrow to get the chance to figure themselves out without all of that pressure, intervention, and programming.
And if somebody asks you, do you have a child? And you say yes. And if they say, well, what do you have? What do you say?
When people ask, is a child a boy or a girl, oftentimes what they're trying to do is connect to you. And they're trying to connect to the child. So what I do is I give them some other bit of information about my child. Is your child a boy or a girl? They're 3.5. Is your child a boy or a girl? Well, actually, they just started preschool. I give something intimate and fun and special so that they know something about this child that is more relevant than what's in their pants.
So you think it would be toxic to label the child one way or the other?
Potentially, yes.
All right, America may be divided on this great gender debate, but it's important to keep the dialogue open. And that's what I started out this whole episode with, is that I wanted us to have a safe place to be able to talk about this. I want to talk about some final thoughts when we come back. Well, I'm back with this group talking about gender pronouns. Now, Dr. Dembo, you say it's fine if people want gender roles, just don't project them onto others.
I was saying that in the context of, a marriage or a commitment like that. It's okay to have strict gender roles for a man and a woman if you find each other, because then it's going to work out real great. That relationship will. And then you find something that's non-conforming and you find each other and that works out great. And it's not a threat to the other person.
At the same time, too, I think that people should be allowed to have boundaries around who's in their space, too. And if you have people who are constantly putting you into a box that you do not identify with, if people are constantly seeing you in a way that you are not being seen and stuff, too, it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting, right? You have to imagine that. So for us, if we don't hang out with certain people who don't understand us, that's okay. But we will try to keep an open conversation going.
Yeah, I would think you wouldn't seek those people out.
Right.
I wouldn't think you'd get up every day and go find Matt Walsh and spend,
Right, exactly.
and spend the day with him, but I would think he would be somebody that you would want to have an ongoing dialogue with because y'all disagree. And it seems like we should just keep the dialogue going and hopefully find some middle ground.
I have a question. Arlo, you mentioned that you don't have your child discussing pronouns or figuring out their pronouns yet. And yet in school, our kids are being asked what their pronoun is. I'm confused about how that works. And then there's always this fluidity right around what pronoun you are each day. So it's constantly changing. How confusing.
I think
For
what it
kids.
is. Oh, sorry. I think what it is that I sympathize with the hurt and distress that I sense from you all. I also wouldn't want my child to learn things from their teachers at school that were topics I was uncomfortable with or I didn't know how I'd want to talk about them. Your children are going to need to know how to navigate a world in which non-binary and transgender people exist.
This is a great conversation to have at home, out of the school. This should not be part of the curriculum.
We're out of time, but I thank everyone for your thoughts and ideas and for remaining civil about the conversation. Thank you so much, Arlo. And Dr. Denbo, thank you for being here and sharing your thoughts. If you or someone you know are looking for support or information, there are resources available such as the Trevor Project, National Center for Transgender Equality, and World Professional Association for Transgender Health. While the issue of pronouns is divisive and can't be solved or fully covered certainly in 1 hour, we hope an open dialogue between both sides can help foster better understanding and awareness wherever you come down on this. For more information about today's episode, log on to drphil.com. Thank you for being here. I'm sure we'll hear from you on this, and I want to hear your thoughts. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.